Actually just did get the shop cleaned up from that bucket that I did a bunch of work on, that hoe bucket here recently. Diane's been up there sleeping. We've had some unfortunate realities of life to deal with here today and last night, but we're going to soldier through. And just did get the shop cleaned up, table cleared off, and things put away from doing that bucket. Got my desk area cleared up, and I got a little bit of a story, a tale of two brothers, kinda, that I was told about yesterday. There's two brothers here in town. They both have separate construction companies. The one company had a Georgia buggy. They said they couldn't keep it running. They junked it. Well, the guys from the other brother's construction company got a hold of the thing after it was scrapped, and they claim they put a spark plug in it, cleaned the carburetor, and the thing run fine. So I don't know what happened there, but the thing's been beat around, patched on. It ain't the prettiest machine. If you're not familiar with a Georgia buggy, it's pretty much a heavy-duty wheelbarrow that you drive. It's commonly used for a lot of different purposes. Obviously, this one for a construction company is most often used for concrete, which is great for that. You know, if you got to put concrete in an area that you can't easily get the concrete truck to, it's something that would be a big help. Let's go take a look at it. Mid Diane, you coming out? Miss Diane ain't getting up. It's rainy and cold, nasty today. Really been a gloomy day. So this is like 16 cubic foot, I think, capacity on this one. This cowling, it's just coming completely apart. It looks like it's been patched on, welded on. If you that's not supposed to be like that. If you look at it here like this, see, it's all, this is what you would call hee-hawed and whopper-jawed, twisted up, cracked up. I first seen the thing. I don't know too much about them, you know, but I first seen the thing and I was thinking, geez, I wonder if the thing's even worth working on. Well, I looked up a 16 cubic foot Georgia buggy like this. If you was to buy a new one, they're between $12,000 and $15,000. So obviously, as soon as I realized that, I said, well, I can see why they want me to fix this up a little bit, because we're not going to have much in fixing this up and getting her back where it's not all goofed up. This is just a matter of pulling things into place and welding it, maybe do some plating where we've got so much metal fatigue and cracking. You know, we could do something to brace it up, but let's check this thing out. Haven't really messed with it much. See what we're working with here. I hope that's neutral. Man, that thing's pretty hot rod, ain't it? So I think it'd be easier to work on with that dumped up. I don't know. I'm gonna start jerking, pulling, and trying to get this in place where it belongs. First thing I noticed is this part down here, it needed to go that way. So she's hooked up here to the tire on the Super Duty service truck and used the mini puller number 1 to go that way a little bit. And when I was doing that, it pulled it out like I was needing it, but it kind of pulled it down. And the whole thing was kind of sagging down. So we got the hoist-o-matic here lifting up, and that made it closer, but it was too far towards me. And then we got mini puller number 2 right here hooked onto there, and that pulled it back. And you're almost never, when you're pulling something in place, you're almost never going to get it, the whole thing perfect, just by pulling. What we're going to do, since we're good right here, we need to tack this, and then that over there in the back that needs to go down, we could pull that down hinging on that tack without losing what we've gained so far. So that's what I'm going to try. Put a tack on that right there, a pretty good tack. And was getting ready to work on this other part. So I knew back here I was going to need to pull that down. I've worked with a lot of people when they're pulling on something like this. Every time they go to pull somewhere, they want to take and cut a piece of metal and weld a tab on. Weld a tab on right here and pull this way. Weld a tab on here. Sometimes you got to weld a tab. You got to cut a tab and weld it on there. But a lot of times you don't have to. I've worked with guys that would already have a half a dozen tabs welded on this thing. Well, you got to cut all them tabs unless you got them laying there. And even if you do, you got to cut them all off. You can't leave them there. You're making work. You know, sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to make a tab and weld it on something, but a lot of times you don't. And even though this has taken a lot of pulling in different directions to get as far as we've got so far, it's not taking a lot of force. It's not anywhere near the amount of force where, you know, some big lug or a chain link would have to be welded on this to do it. And a perfect example of that, if we look right here where that needs pulled, I was thinking I was going to take a mini puller and hook it on this clamp. I put the clamp on there. Well, then I realized because this clamp, you know, it's long like a damn pipe wrench or something. I can do it. I can do it with just that. See right there, I've got it. That's ready to go. That's ready to tack. But all I've done, I'm grabbing and using the leverage of this Bessie clamp and putting her right back where she needs to be. That's ready to tack. Pretty good position through here. And got it held where it needs to be. Some weld inside of there, and in the back of that back there. Still got an issue here. And we're still low on this side over here. See, if I put this up here, that's almost setting level with the thing right there, you know, just sitting on the shop floor. Put it back here, this is low. If I take Put the hoist on that thing. That's picked up clear up off the ground, so the machine does not weigh enough for me to do. Let's make some, I'm going to get that precision tool right there, and I'm going to set you down and use that precision tool there to make some adjustments. What I'm seeing go on here, since this is still cracked, I've got it pulled together where I can weld it. Whenever I lift up on that and I get it where it's looking good, where the front of that and the back of that's on the same plane, see, it doesn't want to stay there because that crack is not holding. As of right now, with the hoist holding the weight of the machine up here on the engine side, see, we're the same. But if I let that down, this goes back down and then we're off. So what we want to do see how much we got? There's so much wobble right there, it can't stay. So what you got to do, I'm going to be holding the weight of this machine up with that thing and then weld that. Let's see what that does. I'm gonna let that cool a minute before I let that hoist down. And while I'm doing that, I'll just tell you, you hear me welding across that. I haven't cleaned any of this stuff. Some grinding was done before I got this thing, and I assume some of the guys from the construction company that brought it to me thought they were going to weld it up, and maybe they changed their mind or they got busy doing something else and decided to send it to me. But I welded right through that. That hasn't been cleaned up or grinded or nothing. I MIG welded right through that with the paint, rust, and everything on it. Now, when I did that, if you were watching how I was welding there, I was jogging that trigger. Bzz, 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 bzz. I used to work for a guy that hated it when I done that. He always said I was going to wear the solenoid out in his machine by clicking that trigger all the time. Now that the Millermatics that I run, I got 2 Millermatics here and they're both mine, and I'll pull that trigger as many times as I want to. What I'm doing there, the technique I'm using, I'm welding through this dirty, trashy metal, even though it's fairly thin, with quite a bit of heat. It's the high heat that's allowing me to weld through that trash and get this thing put together without wasting all that time doing a whole bunch of grinding beforehand on something that's got a gap in it anyway. I can get a good weld there because it's got a gap, and because I got plenty of heat, I'm going to shoot the gas to it and weld it. Well, if I've got that much heat to burn through that trash, I've got too much heat to stand there and pull the trigger. That's where, like the guy I used to work for, when I would do that, he would say, don't jog the trigger 500 times on that machine, turn it down. Well, if you turn it down, you can't burn through that paint, rust, and trash like I'm doing right here. So just know that, you know, that's how I do that. That's what I was doing right there when I was jogging that trigger. You know, I'm running more heat than you would normally run on material that thickness. I'm running that heat because I'm burning through that trash. I'll let this down now and we'll see how it does. Okay, welded that up, let it cool off and set it down. And if we look right here, the plane that the front of this thing's on, we got just a slight left bubble, and then bring it back here, got just a slight right bubble. So we're within tolerance of what I would say it's good enough for what it is and who it's for and what they're going to do with it. Moving on to more repair. I want to build up quite a bit right there before I go across here. I keep setting fire to that thing, but I ain't scared. This is an example of your basic garden variety pilot weld technique, where you just pile it on there, make it whole. I used to not have any trouble welding overhead and keeping my head in whatever position I needed to make it happen. I have problems with my neck now. I've just lost strength. I'm not as strong as I was to hold my head and the shield and everything wherever. It's what I call a welding pillow. Save all kind of cat food, dog food bags, feed sacks, or whatever. I've put rags in them, old rags. I've put foam. This has got foam from right there's a place. This has got that white foam in it, like a packing material foam. Use stuff that I was going to throw away, and if you burn it up, you ain't out nothing. All of this area where I need to weld across here had big gap in it. This is filled in. I've filled all that up. This is at the first stage of filling it up. Now, when you fill a gap like this gives you an example of what I did. I would go to the middle and put a tack. Then I'd come over here and put a tack. Then I'd put a tack between those two tacks, put a tack on this other end maybe, and then there's a tack already right there, so I put a tack in between the end tack and that one, and now I've got a series of tacks, and since I jumped around in different areas, I didn't get the material too hot to make it burn through too bad. Well, stage 2 would be right here. And what I've done right here is I already had tacks like this in place. So I welded between the tacks. And I would do that by maybe welding between those two tacks. Then come here and weld between these two. Then weld between those and weld between the other. The idea being that the first thing you need to do is, before you get this too hot, get some bridges built across those gaps, and then build bridges between those tacks and put them together. A guy just starting out welding, he'll come over to a big gap and just try to weld, and he's moving and it gap's getting bigger and he can't get it filled in, and you've got to manage material and heat. And that's what you do when you make these tacks. You might not think of a hoist as being something that you would use to hold a hydraulic hose out of the way, but it works. Patched up. Patched up. All patched up. Still got a little bubble right back here when we got bubble left up here. And what I noticed is I went to look at the other side what it needed, and it's not as bad, but it needs welded pretty much everywhere the other side did. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hook this hoist back on here while I'm welding that other side. Hook that on there, lift it up. If I got the weight of that machine and that hoist pulling on this corner while I weld this other side, that might take the rest of that out of it. I don't think it's going to hurt it. I'm just going to try it. Let's get the welding on this stuff. This side wasn't all busted up and split open like that other side, but it needed a little dab on it. Bustification, crackulation, and that's just plain nasty. Contaminated material. It's better than it was. Let's see two places coming apart on the tub. Brought her out of the shop. All done. I hollered at them there this morning and I asked them if they wanted me to do anything other than just weld her up, and it sounded like they didn't. They're figuring just getting her welded up is good enough. So that's it for that hot rod. And that right there, pretty much, I would say, would be a video on MIG welding really contaminated stuff. And if you try to do that, what you're going to find is, you know, you're going to get a lot of porosity in the beginning when you try to weld through that stuff that's severely contaminated. And on something like this, where it doesn't matter how much material you add, you really just keep welding through it, you know. And the way I spot, the way I jog the trigger on the MIG on stuff like this, you know, like I showed you down here on filling that gap, you got to do that, because sometimes on the contaminated stuff, you know, if you just keep trying to weld on it, holding the trigger, and you keep trying to weld, it just boils out such a mess that eventually you just burn clear through it, and that doesn't work. You're going to have to jog the trigger, let it cool, and what you're doing is you're adding some decent material to the trash. Even though you might be getting porosity, you're adding a decent tack of something to the trash. And as you continue to do that, you're continually adding a little bit more and a little bit more. And as you add that better material with your MIG wire, that's going to increase the percentage of what's better shielded steel and what's trash. As you increase that percentage of what's better steel and less trash, you're going to be able to weld more on it. You're going to be able to add more material then. So that's kind of what you got to do on stuff that's really rusty and contaminated. You got to just continue to add more as you can until you get to a point where you can start to really hold the trigger down and weld. So that's it for that. On to the next one. See ya. So I fixed the whole Georgia buggy, welded everything up. What's Miss Diane doing? Miss Diane, what you doing, Miss Girl? Nap time. Always nap time for Miss Diane the princess.